So there are not a lot of books that take place in the Franco-Prussian War, but Robert Brightwell has written quite a good one. And the small number of books that there are, I think his is a great, a shining sample of what the. I'm blowing it already. I'm trying to do a cold open. So anyway, we're going to talk about Robert Brightwell's uh, Assignment Paris. But real quick, first of all, who am I? Well, I'm the author, you know. I'm Cody C. Engdahl. I've written, I have 5 novels out. I have novel 6 on its way, which is also a Franco-Prussian War novel coming out hopefully early next year. My book's called the French Fiasco. And while we're taking care of some business, I would like to tell you that right now, my 3rd novel, which is Blood for Blood at Nashville, is only 99 cents in the U.S. And that will that's for the Kindle version on Amazon, and that will be good all the way through Tuesday, the 24th of September, 2024. So here you go, real quick commercial. I put up there you go. So there it is. Yeah, let me just check my dates here. Yeah, Tuesday the 24th is it'll be on sale through them. And then if you live in that's in the US, and then it'll be on sale in the UK for 99 pence for the following week. So if you're interested in jumping in, and I'll tell you this, my books all connect together, and there's certainly they tell an overall story. But I wrote each one that if you found that one first and didn't want to read the other ones to get to it, I write everything you need to know contained in each book. So even though it's book 3 of the certainly the Civil War trilogy, you can read this book and still understand it without having read 1 and 2. Now, I would like you to read book 1 or 2, but if you're not interested in the Battle of Island Number 10 or the Battle of Perryville, you can just jump right into this one and read it. And it is a self-contained story, and anything you need to know from before is in it. So, by the way, I just want to let you know I'm having troubles. I don't know what it is. I've been going to a doctor, and I had a referral to go to an eyes, nose, throat doctor. Something wrong with my mouth. My tongue is swollen. It's been like this for months now. My gums are sore. My throat is sore, so it makes it kind of hard for me to talk. So that's why I'm not drunk. That's why I sound funny when I talk. So anyway, here's my book, Blood for Blood in Nashville, 99 cents in the U.S. Sitting at 4.2 stars, not bad. I'd like to get that up a little bit. So if you do read it, please give me some 5-star reviews. And yeah, all right. And there are some of the reviews. Okay, let's get on to what we were going to talk about here. So first, I want to tell you a little bit of the story of how, and let's swap this out as well, because we're talking about Robert's book, not my book. I'm going to share screen, and we'll do this. Yeah, I want to share that. Okay. So one of the things I do is once I read a book, a novel, I only really do this for living authors that I feel like I can help promote. So I read the book, I write a review, I write it on my word processor, and then I copy and paste it into the Amazon and the Robert. If you happen to ever watch this, and if you watch this now or soon, I wonder, like, where's this review on Amazon? It takes up to 72 hours to be approved. So it's in the approval process. But this review is up on Goodreads. Goodreads is automatic. It goes right away. And then what I do is I then put the review, copy and paste the review into my blog. And that, because I figured this out, like, before, what I would do is, like, you can't really share an Amazon review, but you can share a Goodreads review. But I realized that when I share the Goodreads review, well, I'm just sharing Goodreads platform, which is a good platform, and I'm grateful to them for all the help they've given me to promote my own books. But I was like, why would I send people to Goodreads when I'd rather send them to my own blog? Because all the social media marketing, all the they say all boats rise with the tide. Well, you can kind of slam that square peg into the round hole of all your social media. At least you try to get everything to work together. So I'd like to build up my all levels of my social media, including this YouTube channel. So please give me a like, subscribe, and give me a comment below if you don't mind. But I also want to build up my blog followers, and then all my social media. And not only that, I'll show you what I do, but on WordPress, they have this neat feature where you can embed a preview of books that are on, like, ebooks that are on Amazon without people leaving the platform. That's great. So I always follow up, like, especially these book reviews. If you're like, okay, this sounds great, I think Robert Brightwell's book sounds fantastic, I want to read it. Well, you can read the first couple of chapters for free in the Amazon preview, and that's embedded in my in my blog post. And then, of course, I'm always promoting myself. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna. I'm gonna tell you the truth. And so below that, then I also have a preview of my latest novel. And my latest novel right now is the Prussian Prince, which is a book that takes place in the Austro-Prussian War that happened 4 years before the Franco-Prussian War. So, so in some ways, yeah, if you're interested in right now, you can kind of consider my book, the Prussian Prince, maybe even as a prequel to Robert Brightwell's book. And of course, it is going to be a prequel to the book that I have coming out, the Prussian Prince. So one of the things they say in writing, especially if you want to make a business of it. And if you saw my last video, I talked about this too, chasing the passion or chasing the money. There's a goal. It's more of a continuum. I still believe very much in chasing the passion, but also keeping an eye on the money too. And one of the things that you should do is, if you're a writer, first of all, if you're not a reader, don't bother writing, because if you don't like to read, how are you going to write things that other people are going to like to read? So I think it's very important to read your peers, read the people that are writing the same kind of stuff that you are. Read within your genre. My genre happens to be military history, historical military fiction, and so I like to read a lot of people that, and especially, like, I write 19th century stuff. Now, I found Robert's book is kind of an interesting story. Well, I will tell you. Well, I'll get to that later. I'll just stick with this story because I know I mumble and I bounce around too much. I belong to a Facebook group, and you can see it here, I think. Yeah. This Facebook group here is called the Franco-Prussian War and Second Empire. It's got 6,100 members, and it has somebody's laughing at one of my jokes. And it's great. It's got a lot of people who do figures, a lot of people who post they do panoramas, they do figurines, a lot of that actually, which I'm very fascinated with. I'm not skilled to do it myself, but I like looking at other people's work. Like, look at this French soldier right here, red pants. That's the one thing that really sticks out about them. And there's paintings and articles and things like that. And also, as a researcher, I was researching my book. I went on there, and it's a great place to crowdsource things. So if I'm trying to get information about something, I can post a question in there, and the group is full of experts, including Robert Brightwell, who will happily come up with an answer within 24 hours. You have all sorts of information. You have all sorts of places to go for references, and I mean, it's just wonderful community. Hang on a second. I have a delivery. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. All right, thanks, sir. All right, you too. Sorry about that. I have a delivery. I know what this is. I'm going to open it real quick. I bought a belt, and they sent me the wrong one. So I asked for them to, send me the right one. They said you can get your money back. I don't want my money back. I want the right belt. So let's make sure we got the right one here. All right, it's the right color. All right, good. They got the right one. And if that's brown, I'm colorblind, but I think it is. So, all right, we're good. I needed a brown belt, not because I'm good at karate, but because I'm trying to hold my slacks up. So anyway, I've been using several sources to write my Franco-Prussian book, and namely the Howard. I can't remember the names now. There's the Waro book, and there's the book written by Howard. It was written in the 60s, and I have the memoirs of the Crown Prince, Friedrich III. He was Fritz? What's his name? Now my mind's going blank. But I have firsthand accounts of memoirs. I have several well-written historical nonfiction accounts and several other sources that I'm using. But I was trying to find out in my book, there is a part of it in which my main character is traveling with the Emperor Louis Napoleon III, as he flees Metz and goes to Chalons, or he eventually ends up in Chalons. And Chalons, I think is how it's pronounced. And I wanted specifics because I know that at some point they say that he was almost captured by Prussian cavalry. And I also wanted some more details of waypoints along the way. And I found a lot of that, but I still needed more specifics. And so I put the question out there, and I got a lot of great answers. And one of them was from Robert Brightwell. And he said, well, you know what? It just so happens that this is in my book too, that's out. And of course he's plugging in his book just like I do. And in his case, it actually worked because I thought, oh, cool. There's not a lot of novels on the Franco-Prussian War, which, scares me because, there's not a lot of novels, so there's not a lot of competition. But then again, there's not a lot of novels because maybe there isn't a big demand for it, which I think I'm probably going to be facing when this book comes out. And so far, the only ones I know is the Emily Zola's book. It's got several different in French. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it correctly, but it's Le Debacle and Debacle, or however they say it in French, the Debacle. Sometimes it's translated into the Downfall or Downfall, and there might be another title, but it's a very 19th century. It was written in 1893, and Emily Zola is a naturalist, which means naturalists like to can be kind of hard to read for a 21st century reader because there's a lot of description. They try to kind of fully immerse you, and so they can it can be very opaque to read because there's so much description, and the plot doesn't move as quickly as you like. But Zola's book is worth reading. And when Robert, and I can't remember what he told me, but he gave me good advice. And but I also was interested. Okay, this guy wrote a book as well. I'm going to read it. I want partly because I want to immerse myself. So even my pleasure reading, I'm reading in the era, as I'm also reading nonfiction stuff, and to keep my mind in the time period. Um, and So I got his book, and it was like $3.99, and I really enjoyed it. There's a few others. Someone suggested Falconhurst, which was written in the 70s. That's a really hard book to find. I found it online, but you have to read it. I have to read it on my computer, which is kind of a pain. I could buy a used copy of it for like $4, but it's like $6 to have it shipped. So $10, but I can read it for free online, which I might do. And then I think I found another book that was written way back then in the 19th century about the frontiers, which are like the guerrilla fighters of the war. So I'm probably going to read that one now. So anyway, I'm going too far on this. So I was excited about reading Robert's book. I will say that it's a good book. It's written in first person. And I don't know if I found this alarming or reassuring, but our books are very different. His is first person, mine's in third person. What's similar about it is both of us, first of all, Robert takes really great care of staying very close to the real history, just like I do. So I like that about him. And when you read his book, if you've been studying the war, then you can see that so has he. And so as you're reading through it, he's hitting things like, yep, that's true. That's true. Like I'm familiar enough with the history that as I'm reading his book, my little bell's going off. Ding, he got that right. Ding, he got that right. Ding, he got that right. You can tell that he has done the homework, and it's written very much into the book. And I'll talk some more about that. But honestly, I would say that if you read Robert's book and read nothing else about the war, that I would say that you would be very well informed about the Franco-Prussian War, why it happened, the basic historical beats of what happened, and all that. Was alarming was, okay, well, I'll say, so the similarities are, I mean, his main character is an Englishman who takes part in the war as a war correspondent. So Robert is English. He put it in English. So it's the war written from this perspective of an English character, which I think is a great way to do historical fiction, because, Robert and I are not French and we're not Prussian. And so putting a character that is like you into it kind of forgives a lot of the foreignness that writing about Prussians and writing about the French can be, because he wrote it through English eyes. My main character is an American who is not a war correspondent, but he's a guy who's been pressed into the Prussian army. But one of the similarities, so we're both using kind of a proxy of ourselves. I mean, my character is not me, and of course his character is not him, but they're kind of a proxy for ourselves to participate in the war. And so what I thought was very interesting and a little alarming is that the first half of his book and the first 2/3 of mine follow the same track historically, meaning that he covers the Battle of Saarbrücken, Spicheren, the Emperor's flight from Metz to Chalons, and the Battle of Sedan. And I do exactly the same thing. The difference is that even though both of our depictions of those events are correct, we're telling different aspects and perspectives of them. Because I write third person and because I have multiple characters, I mean, it's mostly around my main character, but I'm able to get into both perspectives. So sometimes during the battles, you're with the Prussians. sometimes you're with the French. And so because of that, I'm able to, like, my battle of Saarbrücken and my battle of Spicheren is told from the Prussian perspective, not the French, where Robert's character is with the French in those battles. Um, the the flight of the emperor from Metz to Chalon is, both of us are writing from the French perspective, but I write it differently because we're both following the history very carefully, but we're also both writing within the cracks of what we know and what we don't know. So the way I present it is differently. Which one's true? Who knows? I'm not saying that they're so different that I'm just saying that they're not so different that you could argue one or the other. We're just two different perspectives or two different ways of writing the same series of events. I have a lot more plot points happening in my book, plots that are important to my character and my character's plot than I would say in his. And then we would both cover the Battle of Sedan. Once again, both from the French perspective, but his is from a British war correspondent. Mine from, well, I don't want to spoil it too much, but you'll see when you read the book. So I think that's very interesting because there's different tracks historically that you could follow that would be interesting, but we both kind of picked the same thing. So Robert, I swear to God, I'd already written all that stuff before I read your book. And if you read his book, mine will be interesting too, because we're writing those events from different perspective, and I show them a little different than what's in Robert. Both of them are good. I would suggest reading both. It's kind of like like a lot of people write the same historical events. I've read Con Iggulden's Caesar books, and I've read Ben Kane's version of those same periods in which Caesar is also a character in, and they're both different takes. Is one right or one wrong? No, they're both different takes based off of what we know about Caesar and Caesar's life, and both of them are very interested. And if you're interested in those, I can't remember Kong Iggulden's series, but if you just type in Kong Iggulden Caesar, excellent series. And then Ben Kane's, I think it's The Forgotten Legion. Both of those series are fantastic. I absolutely recommend them. And so right now where I am is I'm right in the middle of the Battle of Sedan. And where my book goes after that is going to be quite different from Robert's book. I would say that Robert's book, to me, is, I like to write, every historical fiction author is on kind of a continuum between historical and fiction. And some of them are more fiction than historical, meaning they're using history mostly as a backdrop to tell their own story. Like they're just setting their story in the backdrop of history, but it doesn't have it's not following historical events. There are other people like Jeff Shera, who write almost, I would call, novelized history, where Jeff Shera books are, you're reading the history, but as a novel, as opposed to like a nonfiction historical book. And even Jeff will say the only thing that makes this a fiction book is that I'm writing out like things like dialogue that I'm supposing. All right, I got a comment here. Aaron Hook says, with events like the Franco-Prussian War, there is a certain narrative that people are drawn to. It's the same with World War II. Writers tend to cover the same campaigns and battles. Yeah, I think so. And especially when you talk about the Franco-Prussian War, because it didn't take very long. I think the war starts in July, like mid-July, and by September 1st or 2nd, it's mostly over. Yes, there's a lot of guerrilla action. Yes, there's some attempts to break the siege at Paris, but really the Battle of Sedan is it. I mean, a lot of people say that the real turning point of the war is, and Aaron, I may be pronouncing this wrong because I never got the pronunciation, but the what I believe is pronounced as the Battle of Gravelotte. It was one of the multiple battles that happened just before the siege of Metz, in which Bazaine was trying to break out of Metz. But in that battle, which I think the Battle of Gravelotte, which is not in my book, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time in it, but my understanding is that tactically, the French won the Battle of Gravelotte, in that they won it, but instead of moving forward, they retreated back to Metz, and that allowed the Germans to completely surround Metz and trap them in there and hold them under siege until finally Bazaine is forced to surrender in October. And what that does is it takes this huge army, I think it's about 140,000 men, and knocks them out of the game. And so the army of Chalons, which is like everybody else they can find, including a lot of new and under-trained and underarmed, under-equipped recruits, is thrown together at Chalons. They're trying to get back to Metz to break the siege, but the Prince Imperial with his Prussian Third Army are chasing them, pushing them north. And then finally what happens is that the army of, I can't pronounce things right, the Meuse River, is basically a chunk of the forces that are surrounding, I think First and Second Army are surrounding Metz. They throw together a fourth army called the Army of the Meuse to come up along the other side so that these two armies can do a pincer move. They almost get them at Beaumont, but end up pinning them down at Sedan. And, well, you're going to have to read the books to get on from there. So anyway, where was I with all this? So, yeah, I would say that that you'll see some similarities, and you'll see some that we tread a lot of the same ground. But I do think that the way we portray those battles, both of them historically accurate, are different, especially because those early battles, I'm doing it from the Prussian point of view. All right, let's get on with the review. So this is the I posted it here, and I'm very happy that I got a lot of attention. Let's see, so far, 13 people have liked it. I'm getting a lot of traction on it. I don't know if Robert has seen it yet. So if you click on this, and I'm going to see if this works. Does it open on this end too? No, I have to change. Oh, I know. I'll do this. All right, we're live, people, so bear with me here. I'm going to stop that. I'm going to go present, share screen, and we'll get to my review here. Oh, no, there we go. All right, this is my review. Book review of Assignment Paris by Robert Bightwell. Assignment Paris is a lively, well-researched adventure with a great character that's fun to read while giving you a good sense of the real history of the Franco-Prussian War. Ne'er-do-well Thomas Harrison is given a job as war correspondent at his uncle's paper. He is sent to Paris to witness much of the war, from the saber-rattling early days through the many battles, including Sedan, the siege of Paris, and finally the bloody week with the destruction of the Paris Commune. There's also a love story with great foreshadowing that will keep you reading to the end. Thomas Harrison is fictional, but is written as a counterpart to the real journalist Archibald Forbes. Many of the main characters' adventures and mishaps are also taken from real experiences of other journalists as well. Even his love interest is based on a legendary and somewhat mystical heroine of the Commune. The main character's first-person narrative acts as a tour guide of the real history, author Robert Brightwell weaves the important historical aspects seamlessly into the story through dialogue and the characters' journalistic pursuits. The result is a very readable and entertaining romp that will leave you with a good sense of what happened during the Franco-Prussian War and the Paris Commune that followed. And then this is what I was talking about. All right. So this is from my blog post. So I was able to embed a preview. Check out a free preview here. So right on my post, you can actually read some of there's chapter 1. Let's see how far it goes, and chapter 2. So this is a really great thing. Chapter 3. I mean, wow, you get a lot out of this preview, and the reason why they do this is because okay, you can read almost 4 chapters. The reason why they do that is because one of the things that we've lost with going to Amazon as opposed to bookstores, you can pick a book up, you can actually open it up and read a little bit and see, like, do I like the writing style? Is this any good? This you can make an educated decision by reading some of the preview, and you can say, well, this book looks great, or oh, it's not for me. So here's what I do. Find my way back. So this is remember, I'm never going to lie to you about this. I'm always promoting myself, even when I'm writing reviews for other people. So I've been sharing this everywhere, including on the group that I met Robert. And then at the end of all that, so check out the preview. And then once you've read that, check out my novel about the Austro-Prussian War. And of course, here's a preview of my book. Let's see how much you can get out of this. Let's see, contents. All right, and there's the preface. Yeah, it's important to put up the preface. So you can skip it, but I like to frame things a little bit. I know that with digital books now, it's better to have things just kick off as quick as possible. But anyway, yeah. So you can read chapter 1. I think all of chapter 1, which starts in 1848 during the revolutions there. Chapter 2, which will actually have a little peek into the American, yeah. So it starts in Berlin in 1848 during the revolt there, or the uprising, and then it jumps. That's kind of like I don't know, a little bit of a prologue maybe. And then it jumps up to December 16th, 1864, Nashville, Tennessee, which is the end of the American Civil War. If you read the book, you'll understand. And by the way, it's book 5 of my series, but like all my books, if you don't want to read anything about the American Civil War or about the Mexican War, you can skip right to, you can just start with the Prussian Prince, no problem. And when the French Fiasco comes out, you can just start right there too. If you're like, yeah, I'm not interested in any of that stuff, but I am interested in the Franco-Prussian War, skip everything else, go right to the Franco-Prussian War. I write every single book as if the reader has not read the previous books, or as if the reader has read everything, but it's been a year since my last book came out, and now they're trying to remember. So I always, everything you need to know to enjoy the novel is in the book. Let's do something else here. I was thinking about this because when I read books that I know I'm going to review, I do take notes while I'm reading it, and Kindle allows you to do that quite easily. Let me see if I can show you some of my notes and talk about them. Just things that I picked out, just little parts of the book that I thought were interesting that I may or may not want to, because I'm always kind of daunted. I get done reading a book, I'm like, well, shoot, now what am I going to talk about? All right, so let me just get this set up for you. Excellent. All right, so let's go over my notes. This is the first time I'm rolling this out for the very first time. So let's stop that. And we're going to open up, let's see, screen share, and let's see, window. And yes. Okay, here we go. So this is from my Kindle, and you can see my notes here. So, uh, okay, yeah. So this is what I talked about great foreshadowing. I'm not spoiling anything because this is very early in the book, right? Um, and he says he's talking about a painting of this beautiful woman. So he sees this painting first, and then later he meets her. And I liked, I like, I think foreshadowing is a great thing. I did it a lot in Mexico My Love because Mexico My Love is written like a Greek tragedy in which all the characters are aware that the tragedy is coming and there's nothing they can, no matter how hard they try to get off the roller coaster that will take them to the tragedy, there's no escaping it. It's very Oedipus Rex like. Uh, Not that anybody is doing anything creepy like Oedipus Rex, but you know what I'm saying. So in this part, he says, after all these years, I still have. He's talking about the painting of the woman. It is much smudged from where I had to fold it to keep it in my pocket, and there is a blood stain on one corner. Yet it still stirs an emotion when I look at it, even now. Perhaps no longer lust, but a lump in my throat at the memories it evokes. And this is in chapter 2. So whoa, okay, well, so there's some regret or something sad when he looks at this painting. What happens? And so I wrote, I highlight that, highlighted or highlight. How do you say that? And I just wrote great foreshadowing, so I could come back to it later. And I didn't put this example, but I reminded myself, and I put that into the review. Okay, so here's yeah, okay. So this is a conversation, and one person says, well, Sadova, which is another word for Königgrätz, the Battle of Königgrätz is also called the Battle of Sadova. At Sadova, the Austrians were armed with muzzle-loading muskets, which meant that they had to stand to reload, and you could fire only a maximum of 3 shots per round. So I wrote in my notes, loading muskets. Oh yeah. So I highlighted that, and then I wrote well-researched, displayed in casual conversation. So this is true what he's talking about here, and it's something that I write to quite a bit in my because he's talking about the Austro-Prussian War here, the Battle of Sadova, and which is featured in my book, The Prussian Prince. And yes, this is a huge factor, and it's something that I cover as well, is that the Prussians had early bolt-action guns. Now, these are the ones that don't have a enclosed magazine or a clip or a detachable magazine. These ones you have to open up the breech by opening the bolt, and then put a paper cartridge in, close it, fire it, and then do that, and then open up again, pull out whatever refuse is in there, and then put another paper cartridge in. Not as fast as, well, we got today, of course, but even like the bolt actions where you have a clip or a magazine, you have to individually put each one in. But this is a lot faster than, shooting. And then I don't know if you've ever worked with a musket or with a muzzle-loading musket. I have, not extensively, but I fired them. And you fire and then you bring it down. You got to be standing. I mean, you can kind of do it lying down on your back, but it's really hard to do. So for the 19th century version of this, you usually have paper cartridges. You bite that open. You pour in it, you have black powder and then the ball underneath, or the bullet, the minet ball. You pour the powder in there, and then you push the ball or the bullet in there, and then and then you put the paper in after it. The paper is like wadding to hold it from falling out, and then you pull out the ramrod and you stick it, and you got meanwhile, everybody's shooting at you, right? You got cavalry coming in with sabers about to chop your head off. These guys are shooting. You're doing all that standing up, right? you got to ram it down, then put your ramrod back in, and now you can fire again. And a well-trained troops, I think the British Redcoats were probably the best at this. They could fire off like 4 or 5 rounds a minute. I mean, they were just flogged into absolute precision clockwork work when it came to loading muskets. But if you think about, the Austrians were still doing that while the Prussians could be lying down, could be hiding behind something, kneeling, and all they have to do is fire, open up the breach, put in another thing, close it, and fire again. So it was a huge advantage. And I guess what I liked about this, and the reason why I made a note of it, is that he's able to relay information like this in conversation that the character is having. And he does this a lot too with a lot of the historical events, because he does a really good job of giving you all these events that the character isn't always a witness to, but because he's a correspondent, he is in the news business, so he's getting reports elsewhere and then relaying it. And it's a first-person narrative. So, the one thing about first-person narratives, and this is just a taste thing, and there are some of my favorite books are written in first person. Some of the best writers, better writers than me, write in first person. I don't like it as a reader, and I don't like it as a writer. And this is no reflection on Robert or anybody else who writes first person or likes it. But for me, when I read first person, yes, I know that the main character is usually going to live anyway. But there's a sense that the main character has survived all of this and is now telling you about it afterwards. And so there's kind of to me, a detachment of the action, because you're hearing the story well after, because the main character is telling you the story. Some people do it really well. I think one of the things that Robert does that kept me in the story more is he did set up that foreshadowing about the character getting kind of a lump in his throat every time he looks at the picture he has of the woman. Well, what happened? What happened to her? And you don't find out to the end. So he does do that very well. And like I said, it's no reflection on him. That's just my own personal preference. I mean, even like the great Bern Cornwell that we're all trying to be like, his Burner, or what is his Uhtred series is first person. His best series, even he himself says it's his best series, the King Arthur one, or the Arthur one, is first person as well. Okay, so Aaron says, the fascinating thing about the Dryza, and please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing these things, the Dryza and the Chesapeake, is that the Chesapeake was the better rifle, but the Prussians were simply better trained with the Dryza. Yeah, that's true. It was a disadvantage, and it also dictated how they fight, their fighting doctrines, because the French had the range. I think the Chesapeake was accurate at like 1,200 meters, where the Dryza was really more like 400 meters. Their tactics were different. So the French, every man was armed with not only a rifle but a shovel, or at least most of them were. And their tactic was to dig in almost anywhere they were, even if they're in a field and they're being attacked. Dig in, and then fire from your quickly made trench or rifle pit, and use the range of your Chesapeake to destroy the enemy. The Germans, the only way they could really fight effectively with infantry, is to storm and to swarm. One of the things that the Prussians kind of pioneered, it was getting away from big, massive attack columns like that worked during the Napoleonic Wars, and go into more squad level tactics. And so the Germans were really good at training everybody on down the line. So even the squad leader, which I think is the smallest unit of about 9 or 10 people. I think they called the squad. The German word for squad is like gun club, which I think is really cool. I think the German squads were like 9 to 12 guys with and they were trained there to act independently, so that if there was any kind of breakdown, all the leaders from your army commanders to the corps commanders to the division commanders to the brigade commanders to the regimental commanders to the company commanders to the platoon commanders, all the way down to that squad leader, understood the objective and how they were going to go about doing it. And so the Germans, instead of sending a huge column that could be decimated by artillery and well dug in rifle fire from the Chesapeake, they would attack from multiple angles so that there wasn't one target to shoot at, but yet you're getting it from all directions. It still killed a lot of Germans. It still was devastating, and there were still a lot of German commanders that hadn't quite figured it out, that the Chesapeake is killing them. But the equalizer, I would say, what turned all that over, and I think this is a really interesting thing if you study the Austro-Prussian War and then the Franco-Prussian War, because the opposite is true in both wars. The French have better rifles, but the Germans had better cannons. They had steel Krupp's guns that were breech loading, and these things had superior, not only superior accuracy and range, but also rate of fire, because now I can't remember exactly how they work, but you're opening up the breech, putting in the round from the rear, closing it and firing it again. You have steel barrels that don't warp as much as like iron or bronze, and of course there's rifling and all that, and you don't have guys exposing themselves, standing out in front of the cannon, stuffing in shells and cannonballs from the front and being shot down by rifle fire or opposing cannon fire. So the French had the range with their Chesapeakes, but the Germans nullified that with the range and accuracy of their artillery. And when you look at Sedan, for example, yes, there is some there is some infantry and cavalry things going on, especially in the beginning. And I'm gonna mispronounce it again. Basel, was a village in the very southern point of the inverted triangle, which was the river valley between the Meuse and the Gironde. And once again, I'm saying all these things wrong, but Sedan sits on the Meuse, and it's in a valley between two rivers that make kind of a V. And basically what happens is that the French are on the run, and they go there as a fortified town, and the Germans are able to occupy basically the surrounding hills and completely surround them with artillery, and then just shell them into oblivion. But that opening act, and this is in my book actually, the opening fight in Basel, what happens is one of the German, I think it's Bavarian division or corps commander sends a division into the village at 4:00 in the morning, because he's afraid that the French are going to escape through that southern route, and they basically walk right into an ambush. The French that are there are inside like houses, stone houses, and shops, everything on well protected, and the Bavarians come walking in, and the French let them, and then open fire. It's devastating. It's an ugly fight. It's there are they say it's one of the early instances of modern urban warfare where the fighting was house to house. It was ugly. There's the Germans were basically down in a barrel with the French shooting down at them, but the Germans overwhelmed them. And there's a lot of atrocities that are reported on both sides. Um, you know, there were a lot of the civilians came out and fought alongside the French soldiers and Marines. And one of the stories is that a lot of the civilians were finding wounded Germans and dragging them into burning houses and buildings and barricading them inside so they burned to death. There was also a lot of reports of the Germans summarily executing every single civilian caught with a weapon. And this is a very touchy subject, and one that I really can't tell you where I land on this, because I understand both sides, right? But it is actually a war crime in our modern era, and I think back then too, Geneva Convention, of having combatants out of uniform. And the reason why is because they called them bushwhackers in the American Civil War, because someone out of uniform, especially like the Germans who were trying not to punish the civilians as occupiers and as an invading army, paying for everything other acquisitions and protecting civilians. But how do you protect civilians when a civilian can hide somewhere, ambush you, and then disappear into the crowd and be under the protection of, well, I'm a non-combatant, so don't hurt me. But then they're sneaking around and killing your guys. So a lot of times in many wars, civilians caught fighting are executed because they're illegal combatants. Well, there should be at least a trial. And the Bavarians were just, they catch you with a gun, they pull you out, stand you up against the wall, and shoot you on the spot. It happened a lot. There's a scene in Emily Zola's novel that's really good. It's so good that I wanted to mimic that scene, but from the Prussian side. But instead, Zola's scene, I have a version of that, except I have it take place by Sharon. Actually, it's not. Fobash is a village where my scene happens. But even in my depiction of the Battle of Bazelles, there are depictions of summary executions and people dragging wounded soldiers into burning buildings. Also, what's a bright spot of that is there's a great story that it's something interesting about the Marines. I wasn't a Marine, I was a soldier. I was in the American Army. But Marines have kind of this. Well, first of all, the U.S. Marines have a camaraderie, like once a Marine, always a Marine, and there's a brotherhood about being Marines. But they also feel that brotherhood amongst Marines of other nations, too. It's really interesting. And there were French Marines that fought there. There was very little naval action, and the French were, bleeding men and running out of men. So they pulled Marines off of boats and sent them down to bolster the French army. So there were French Marine units that had come off boats and were fighting with the army at Bazelles. And there's a famous story, and it's in my book, and I do a historical note where I talk about him as well. I can't remember his name, but there is, and this scene is also in Emily Zola's, but we do it differently. Zola's novel, in which French Marines and civilians were in a house, and they're basically, the Marines were tasked with covering the retreat because they decided to pull the French forces out of Bazelles so they could start bombarding it, so the French artillery could open up, because it was filthy with Germans, and the Marines stayed behind, first in, last out, to be the rear guard, to hold the Bavarians back so that the French army could get out. And this captain, he later becomes, I think he ends up being like at least a brigadier general, if not higher than that, and is a national hero for France and a hero to all Marines around the world. He says to his fellow Marines and the brave civilians that are fighting with him, gentlemen, he says, we are tasked with this, and we are going to fight to the last cartridge. And legend has it that he actually fired the last cartridge. They were eventually overwhelmed. All the civilians were taken out and shot on the spot. The Marines were taken captive. And eventually this guy who fired the last shot, I think he did survive the war and had a, continue his career in the French military. But it's an interesting story. It's in my book. It's not in Richard's book because Richard wasn't, his character is not in that part. So he wouldn't know about it later on. But anyway, wow, I know. We were doing this, weren't we? Okay, let's go through some more of these. I hope you guys are enjoying this. All right, so that was here's another note on page 56. Let's see. The Prussian guns also had breech loading mechanism. Yeah, so I talked about that briefly, and I didn't leave a note. I just highlight that, and once again, this is Robert. I like show and tell. I like one of the things that fascinates me. I'm always when I write books for adults, but I write first of all, I was reading adult books when I was 12. I write to the 12-year-old boy in me that wanted adventure. I try to be as historically accurate as possible, and yes, and show how brutal it can be, but I'm a romantic, and of course this is the romantic era, so there's a lot of I romanticize a lot. War's ugly and it's never good, but I do kind of, the 12-year-old boy in me is fascinated with the guns and fascinated with the uniform, so I want to share that with you. So I like in my books, I'm always describing how the guns work, or how to show you this thing, how it works, how it operates, show you how they do it. I enjoy that when other authors do it. And I'm always interested in weapons and talking about them. And so I like that. Once again, this is him giving you, explaining to you how things work, where he's explaining to you, the difference between the French guns. The French are still using muzzle loading cannons. And this is once again him weaving in real historical aspects into the narrative in a way that that feels natural, but yet very informative. And once again, if you read Robert's book and you read nothing else, no nonfiction books, nothing else about the Franco-Prussian War, you're going to have a pretty good idea of how it went down. All right, let's see this one here. I tore out the pages I had written describing a great French victory and screwed them up into a ball as we watched my words feed the flames. Pascal turned to me. I don't know why I highlight that. I like it. This is at the Battle of Spicheren, and I think what it is that it was. I think the character had written a glowing story about the French victory, but it turned into a defeat as the Prussians eventually won the day there. All right, here's another one of my notes. The French guns with their new shell fuses were much more effective now. Yeah, once again, we're getting into the inside baseball there, which I think is interesting to talk about the technical things, especially when you're writing 19th century war, because the technology is changing so fast. When we start the 19th century, it's the Napoleonic age. Most of the armies are using smoothbore, muzzle-loading muskets, smoothbore cannons. By the end of the 19th century, we have machine guns. We have the beginning of aviation. We have breech-loading cannons, rifled cannons. We have bolt action rifles with clips, the technology is changing so fast that even like when I wrote my trilogy of the American Civil War, the technology changes over the course of my books, and I had to keep up with it. The Second Michigan Cavalry, which is the regiment that I used to write my story around, they start the war with revolving rifles. It's kind of like, imagine a pistol but in rifle form, and they end with Spencer repeaters, and so everything, and war in a way is an accelerator of technology. World War II definitely was. Because of necessity is the mother of invention, right? So when you're at war and you have to win, you're going to work a lot harder to improve things. And so war is ugly and terrible, but also industrialized war advances civilization and technology because we learn so much about medicine, advancement in medicine, advancement in food preservation, advances in logistics and transportation, advances in weaponry and science and all sorts of things. Here's another one. Let's see here. As I stood back on the pavement, a cart rattled past. I really like this. I won't tell you what happened, but I like the metaphor of this. As I stood back on the pavement, a cart rattled past. Its metal-rimmed wheels crushing the small bouquet. Stanley shouted angrily at the driver for his carelessness, but I told him not to bother. The delicate beauty of the petals crushed by the iron and falling between the stones was strangely appropriate somehow. I won't tell you why that's appropriate, but I thought that was a beautiful passage. It gave me chills. Great job, Bob. Great job. You got me with that one. You got me right in the feels, man. All right, so here's another. Let's see. I just put a note. Yeah, this is what was really interesting, and I always do. Bernard Cornwell taught me to do this, not personally. Bernard Cornwell will never even know who I am. But at the end of my books, and a lot of good writers like Robert, they do a historical note. And basically in the historical note, you talk about the real history that's in your novel. You talk about, you give a little bit more information. Anytime I deviate, and if I deviate, like I have an explosion in Mexico, My Love, that I have happening maybe 2 hours earlier than it actually did. Things like that you admit to. But you also do things like this. Robert Bob, as I think he goes by on Twitter, talks about a lot of the real history that he used. So Archibald Forbes is a character in the book. Is kind of like a mentor to Brightwell's fictional character, but Archibald Forbes is real, and so he pulls a lot of the information and a lot of the scenes from Forbes' actual writing, which I think is great. He also uses. There's a lot of. Well, let's see here. Yeah, and so I wrote uses real characters was my note there. I thought that was interesting. A lot of the things that happen to the main character are pulled from actual instances of things that happen to other real journalists. There's just kind of like Robert's main character is kind of what do you call it? I can't think of the word now. But he's kind of like a sum of all these other characters in one, all these real characters in one, summed up in one, an amalgamation of all these real experiences and real reporters in all wrapped up into this one fictional character. I thought that was a very interesting thing to do. Let's see, there's also an account, a British journalist encounter with the Frontiers. Yep. That's in the book. It's very interesting. And like I said, he uses real things that happened and just have them happen to his character. I thought that was great. Let's see. Yeah, and my note was many real events that happened to journalists appear in the book. Um, let's see, an article on the gun did appear in the front in the Times. Yes. So in the beginning of the story, the main character gets a scoop on the mitrailleuse, which is like the forefather of the machine gun. It was kind of like the secret weapon of the French. And he writes an article, and I won't say what happens because it's a pretty clever little ruse that Robert wrote, and I really liked it. But all I'll say is that in his notes here, he says that an article did appear in the paper about the gun around the time that he has his character write the article. So I thought that was interesting. Further confusion in the chain of command meant that none arrived in time. What is that? Why did I highlight? That might be just an accident. Sometimes my thumb actually, because I read a lot of this on my phone, and you scroll with your thumb. So sometimes I accidentally highlight things. So I don't think I meant that one. This one looks like I meant it. Okay. You know what? I'm not going to show you that because that's a good enough. Dang it. Okay. I hope you didn't read that too much because I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to spoil it too much. I think all in all, the book was fantastic. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's I enjoyed it. I was relieved that that a lot of the historical events that I arrived at and facts, I'm seeing them reflected in his book too. So it makes me feel like, okay, I'm on target with that. Our books are different. Like I said, his is a first person narrative. It's a British war correspondent. Mine's a third person narrative. It's about an American Civil War veteran who gets kind of wrapped up, gets tangled up into something that's out of his control and has kind of a bewildering experience. It is a fiasco. It's a mad, panicked run for his life. I want to give too much away, but I think you'll really enjoy it. So go out there, read Bob's book. It's $3.99 right now. I don't know if he's running any specials on it. My book is coming out. I'm aiming at early next year. I was hoping to have the rough draft done by October. I don't know if I'll be able to pull that off. I am finishing up part 3. So I'm sorry, part 3. It's going to be in 4 parts. And part 3 ends with the Battle of Sedan, and then there's a part 4. And part 4 is really the reason why I wanted to write this book. So it's a very important thing. It's something that I've been building up to for a very long time, even in other books. So I'm looking forward to that. I have to say that, like I was talking about before, because I usually start subjects and then I get sidetracked. Everybody has a different on its continuum between, when we talk about historical fiction, there's the historical and there's the fiction, right? And everybody is on the on this continuum between those two. Harry Turtledove is more fiction than historical. Point. He wrote a novel about somehow General Lee and the Confederates get AK-47s, and he writes alternative histories, which are great. I don't read a lot of those because I like things that are closer to the real history than speculation. It's interesting, but I want to learn from, and I'm sure there's things that you can still learn from it, but I actually want to read and write historical fiction as a way to learn and to teach real history, right? So on the historical part of the continuum, let's see if you have like the alternate history and historical fantasy. It's still good stuff. And then on the historical end, you have things that are more closely, novelized history, like Jeff Scherer, I think is the best example. When you read Jeff Scherer novels, you're basically reading the history, but written in a novel form instead of reading it as a nonfiction work. Um, and then everybody is somewhere in. Robert's very close to that, and the metaphor I used, I alluded to in my review, is that it's almost as if Robert's main character is a tour guide of the Franco-Prussian War. So his character is basically taking you on a tour. You're getting on the bus, and then he's driving it, through the battle of, through the early days in Paris, where everybody's saber rattling and cheering for the war, and through the early battles of Saarbrücken, and it's like you're on this tour bus, and the bus stops, and you experience the Battle of Sedan, and then the bus moves on to Paris, and you experience the siege. There's some other things that happen between Sedan and the siege that are very interesting, but I feel like he's very much telling the story of the war through the eyes of this correspondent. I'm telling a story. He's here. I'm about here. I'm still on the historical half of that continuum, in which I have a fictional story, a fictional character that has his own plot, his own story. But I weave it into the real history, so that I always look at my books as like almost like 50-50. I don't know. I mean, someone one day after I'm dead could do an analysis of this and say how much of Engdahl's books are the historical story and how much of it is his character story. But what I try to do is all my books to me have two plots. There's the historical plot in which I want to tell you the story of this event. So that when you read my book, you have a clear understanding of what happened. So I have rules that if it can be known, you can't mess with it, right? You have to portray it as it really happened. You have to portray. I like having historical people in my books and interact with my characters, but you have to portray them how they were, and they have to be in the places that they were, and the scenes that they have without your fictional character. You have to make sure that scene is correct as best you can. But at the same time, I have a character who's got very much his own story that is happening, interwoven. And to me, that's like 50% of the book. So 50% is my character's story, and 50% is the historical story that I keep as close as possible. I would say with Robert, it's more like 80-20, where his book is more 80% of we're just telling you the story of the Franco-Prussian War, but we have this interesting character who's kind of experiencing things along the way, and he has his own story too, and a very good one too. There's some very tense moments. There's some clever things. One of the things that I think is interesting about Bightwell is that there are certain things that are in the public domain now. Like, for example, if you wanted to write a Sherlock Holmes book, you can, because no one owns the copyright anymore. I know I have two author friends who are successful, who have written successful Robin Hood series, and they're very different from each other. And I've read books from both of them and liked them both. Anybody can write if I wanted to write a Robin Hood book, I can write it. If I want to write a Sherlock Holmes book, I can write it. So there is a series that was written. I thought it was written in the 19th century. I think it was. I could be wrong, but and I can't remember who's the original writer. But there is a Flashman series, and I want to read it because I've heard great things. This is a very early age of historical fiction, and Flashman is much like the Baron von Munchausen, which is also a series that was written and based off of a real person, by the way. But Flashman is kind of like the talented Mr. Ripley. He's kind of a con artist. He's a scoundrel, a coward. I haven't read it, but I heard they're great and they're funny. And he's a guy. It's military historical fiction with a character who's kind of just a dirty dog, and there's a bunch of them written. So these were written in I believe they were written so that they're in public domain, so anybody can write a Flashman book now if they want to. So Robert has written, I think, 12 books about Flashman, and apparently they've done pretty well. So apparently the readers who like the original writer have accepted Robert Brightwell's continuation of the story. And so I don't know Robert personally. I'm assuming that Robert started writing those and then decided to create his own character, which is the character that's in Assignment Paris. I think there's 2 books now. I think there's Assignment Paris and there's Assignment Sudan, which is about, I guess, that character is going to be. And I'm not familiar with a lot of those Anglo-African wars. So I think he's going to participate in something in the Sudan. So anyway, that's my review of Robert Brightwell's Assignment Paris. I enjoyed it. Robert, if you ever watch this, I hope I got it right, and I hope you enjoyed that you enjoyed my review, and I hope it helped get you some book sales and all that. All right, so let's talk about me. So where am I? I'm writing almost every day, but it's slow, and it's because getting the history right is very important. So I'm writing the Battle of Sedan. I'm past the opening salvos, and the fight in the village of Bezales, or however you say it, and I'm building up to a big moment that it's going to, every part is kind of like its own novella, so every part kind of ends with a big climax, right? So I'm getting to that point. It's planned out what happens, and then I'll be starting part 4. I don't know. The book is about 72,000 words right now. I want it to be around 80,000 words. I might overshoot that because that means I have to kind of land the plane in 8,000 words. That might happen. I don't know. It depends on what's stymieing me a little bit is that I know what I want to have happen. In fact, I've even written some of the scenes that are I've written some of the scenes that are in part 4 2 books ago. Because I knew what I wanted to do. But I think I know where I'm going to have it happen, but I'm still kind of forming out how I get to those things and how I get to where I want this then. So like I said, I'm going to try to get that done. I mean, I'll definitely get it done by the end of the year. I'd like to get it done earlier. What I'd like to do is do 2 months of pre-orders. Now, I've expanded that more and more as I've gone, because with each book of pre-orders, I've done better than the last one. I think Blood for Blood was the first one I did with pre-orders, and I got a trickle. And then, and I only did like a week or 2, and I don't like doing pre-orders until I know that I'm going to make the deadline. And that means the first draft has to be absolutely completed. I can't be like still trying to figure out how to end the book and the due date's coming out. I have to be at least within the editing period before I set a pre-order, the pre-order date and start the pre-order. Because you don't want to screw that up. For multiple reasons. One is you make a promise to your readers. You don't want to disappoint them. You don't want to lose them. The other thing is, if you miss your pre-order date, I think Amazon will forgive you the first time, but they will bar you from doing pre-orders for a whole year. I don't want to ever be in trouble with Amazon. So so the first time I did it, I think I did 1 or 2 weeks of pre-order. I got a few, not a lot. I got a few. And some people say don't do pre-orders. I think David Chisholm, I don't know if he still says this, but he's one of the book marketing gurus. He's behind Publisher Rocket. He's a good person to follow. But he had a video after I did my first pre-order, after I already set it up, and he says, unless you're famous, have a big following or a great marketing plan, do not do pre-orders. And the reason why is because as soon as you start to pre-order, your ranking starts, right? And your ranking is of all the books sold by Amazon, whether it's a Bible or a textbook or a cookbook or a novel or whatever, all the books sold on Amazon are ranked, and there's millions of them, right? And the lower your ranking, the better your book is doing. If your ranking is under 100,000, that means you're selling at least a book a day. So you can look at people's rankings and see how well they're doing. A lot of my books and a lot of my peers, unless they're running something special, their books are usually around the 2,500,000 area. If you're doing really well, some of the big shots with big publishers, they might maintain under 100,000. Being under 100,000 means you sell at least a book a day. And the lower you are, the more you're selling. And there's actually, I think Publisher Rocket has a calculator that you can put in the ranking, and it'll tell you, if you want to know how much someone's selling, just take the ranking, put it into this calculator, and it'll tell you on average how many books they're selling a day. So anyway, once you start the pre-order, you also start the ranking. So you haven't actually sold any books, but your book is getting ranked by the pre-orders. So if you have a lot of pre-orders, that's great, because you're starting off. The lower you are in the ranking means the better you're doing, and the more that the Amazon algorithm is going to show your book to other people, especially if you're running ads. But if nobody is pre-ordering your book, then your book is going to get buried up in the millions. And when you're up in the millions, it means no one's buying your books for weeks. And if Amazon sees that, then they're not going to really bother showing your book to a lot of people, because they're like, well, this book isn't really doing it, so we're not going to show it. That's how the system works. So if you do a pre-order and nobody knows who you are, and people are just, they might take a chance on you if your book is available now. Like, oh, I've never heard of this guy, Cody Engdahl. Well, I'll try him out. I'm interested in the Franco-Prussian War. I'll buy the Prussian Prince. But if they don't know me, well, I'm not going to sit around and wait for a guy I don't even know. I don't even know the book's going to be any good. So that's why the advice is, unless you're famous, unless you're famous or have a loyal readership or a great marketing plan, don't do pre-orders. Well, my joke is I have a little bit of those three. I'm a little bit famous. I have a small but dedicated readership, and I have an excellent marketing plan. I'm stretching it here, but so I was like, okay, I can't take it back now after David Chisholm said don't do it. I also have this saying, and I came up with this myself, maybe other people say it too, but I always say, bet on success. Don't bet on failure. So betting on failure would be like, oh, I'm not going to do a pre-order then, because if it doesn't go well, it's going to screw me over. No, I'm going to bet on success. I'm going to say, no, I'm going to make it successful. So I did. I pushed it. The next book, Mexico My Love, I did pre-order. That one, I came up with this idea. Okay, to entice people, I'm going to offer it for 99 cents in the pre-order and let them know that it'll go up to $4.99 when it's or $5.90. I can't remember what it was. $5.99 maybe. $4.99? I can't remember. $4.99 when it comes out. So hey, if you pre-order this now, it's only 99 cents. If you wait for it comes out, which is fine, it'll be $4.99. That helped, and I got more. I got a lot more than I got with Blood for Blood. So then, by then, I was like, okay, I'm a guy who does pre-orders now. I'm not retreating. I'm going forward. So I did it for the Prussian Prince. I had my best yet. I had 4 or 5 times more than I had with the previous one with pre-orders. And why? Because every time I put a new book out, not only does each book does better than the last one. Why? Because there have been more people who have been reading my series and reading my books, getting to know me. So my readership is growing with each one. So the pre-order with the Prussian Prince did a lot better than Mexico, My Love, and way better than Blood for Blood. That one I ran for a month. Now, the one thing that I was disappointed with is I have followers on Amazon. Every author on Amazon has followers or can have followers, right? So if you like an author like me, but anybody out there like Robert Brightwell, you can go to that person's author page. We all have one. Some have not set theirs up, but it's just there with no picture. I have set mine up, because I'm very vain. I want people to know what I look like. You can, underneath their picture, you can follow that author. And when you do, it's going to let you know when that person has a pre-order or a new book out. So I was like, great. Well, no email went out during my pre-order. And I was like, what gives? I put a pre-order. I get it for other people. And it's because my pre-order window was too short. They say you need to have like at least 60 days of pre-order. So I'm going to do that as well. I'm going to do 60 days of pre-order instead of 30 days. So I think it started off like just 2 weeks. And then like the last one was 30 days. Now it's going to be 60 days. And hoping that I just got another follower. I can't see who they are. I can't contact them. I can't do anything, but I can see how many I have in Author Central. And I just got a new one today, so I'm very excited about that. Slowly growing that up. I'll just tell you, if you've been with me this long, I have 167 people following my author page on Amazon, and I'm hoping to make that tens of thousands someday. But so I can't leverage that myself. So I'm trying to follow the rules. Hopefully those 167 people will get an email from Amazon saying, hey, one of the authors you're following, Cody Seingdahl, has a pre-order for the French Fiasco. The other thing is, I was really disappointed in this. A lot of my friends, I follow their author pages, and they put stuff out. And, there and people of multiple levels, people who are super famous, people who I have helped mentor get their first book published. And I'm getting emails when they put out a book, but no book. I don't get one when I put my last one. Not all of them, but my last one, no email went out. I didn't get one. My friend Lloyd, who usually lets me know, he didn't get one. My girlfriend didn't get one. What gives? The only thing I can think of is that most of this is algorithm, and nobody makes the decision. It's just a robot says, okay, I think it probably got flagged because the Prussian Prince on the cover has a Prussian eagle, and it has guys wearing pickle help, which are the spiked helmets. And a lot of that is iconography that was later used by, let's just say, for the sake of YouTube algorithms, the bad guys from World War II. Now, just so you know, the Prussians were not the bad guys from World War II. In fact, many of the Prussian officers were Jewish. Not all of them, but there were plenty of them, and plenty in the service. In fact, I have a Jewish character because I wanted to talk about that in the Prussian Prince during the Austro-Prussian War, because they were there. But the Iron Cross is on there too, and so the Iron Cross. A lot of people say, "Oh, that's a symbol of the bad guys from World War II. You can't have that, or you're a bad person." The Iron Cross was developed by, I think it was William the Fourth in 1806, after the Prussians had been decimated by the French and Napoleon. And King William Koenig, they're not Kaisers. Kaisers are emperors. Koenigs are kings. He rebuilt in exile, rebuilt his army. And one of the things he realized, like, what happened? We were one of the best armies in the world during the time of Frederick the Great. What happened? Well, what happened was nepotism. Like a lot of the early and middle modern age, a lot of these armies officers were the second sons of noblemen. It was where your leftover kids went, and so a lot of guys who didn't deserve their rank were leading, had no business leading troops, were leading troops, and it was disastrous. And whereas Napoleon had a meritocracy, I mean, Marshal Ney, who is one of the greatest marshals of the French army during the Napoleonic Wars, was a street brawler, man. It was a nobody, but in Napoleon's system, like it or love it, love it or hate it, a common man could rise to the top. Genghis Khan was the same way. I'm not saying they were good, but I'm just saying they had meritocracy. You did not have to be someone a nobleman's son to rise to the top. And so the Prussians learned that lesson. And so the Iron Cross was invented in 1806. Basically, it was an award that could be given to any man, a prince or a common man who's a private in the army. If you show bravery, you too can wear the exact same award. That's what that was all about. And so throughout, not only during the wars of what they call it German liberation, which is the German term for the Napoleonic Wars, where the German kingdoms fought off the French yoke and the Napoleonic yoke, but then also in the in the wars of German unification, the Holstein-Schleswig War, the Austro-Prussian War, the Franco-Prussian War, and then the German Empire. Prussia becomes basically the king of Prussia becomes the emperor of the Germans, all through the German Empire through World War I. So when the bad guys of World War II show up and take over Germany, they co-opt military traditions that were already there, going all the way back to the Napoleonic Wars, including the Iron Cross. And guess what? Today, in the unified Germany's, our NATO ally, probably one of our strongest defenses against the Russian encroachment, them and the Poles, they still give out the Iron Cross. And modern day German tanks still have the Iron Cross on it. Not because they're the bad guys of World War II, because the Iron Cross is something bigger than that. It goes all the way back to 1806, and it's part of old German military history, not just when they were the bad guys. Twice over. It depends on your perspective. And that's an interesting thing too. Like when you talk about like the wars of German unification, like the Holstein-Schleswig War or the Austro-Prussian War or the Franco-Prussian War, who are the bad guys? I can see why people would say maybe let's talk about the Franco-Prussian War, for example. The Germans absolutely mopped the floor with the French, and they do it almost 3 times in a row, basically. But were they the bad guys? The French were imperialists. The French had invaded Algeria in 1832 and basically colonized northern Africa, in which there was a lot of suppression, a lot of fighting, nonstop fighting in northern Africa. In fact, a lot of the generals that fight in the Franco-Prussian War learn their trade fighting the Algerians or fighting in Mexico too. It's the French that declared war on the Germans, or on Prussia. Now, yes, they were goaded into it and maneuvered into it by Otto von Bismarck, but it was the French who declared the war. The French also, their plan was a quick strike to go all the way to Berlin and to put Prussia into their place. Little did they know that the Prussians had been planning this for 4 years, but they wanted to make the French instigate it. The the Germans were just far better prepared. It's as simple as that. The French had better guns, and did they have a bigger army? I can't remember, and I won't go through all the different factors. But the one thing that the Germans did is they had planning. They had built multiple rail lines, and had plans in place to quickly mobilize their troops and quickly move them to the front. They trained in a new way of fighting that ran circles around the way the French approached the war. They were just much more prepared and planned out and determined. And the French had planned to invade Prussia and to sack Berlin. And the reason why is because Prussia was a rising power. And, they called it, what's the word they call it? The quadrille. It was the balance of power in Europe in the 19th century. There were 5 superpowers. There was Britain, France, Prussia, Austria, and Russia. But Prussia was getting stronger and stronger, and they had beaten the Austrians and knocked them out of contention of being one of the superpowers. And then they were also forming up and taking control of their neighbors and building a Germany that would be too strong for the French to defeat, to withstand. So the French found an excuse to attack Prussia before they got too big for their britches to knock them back down. But the Prussians knocked them down instead. And you have World War I as the result, because all this is kind of everything that happens, I say, from the American Revolution onward is the march to World War I, which is World War II. Wow, we've been going for an hour and 36 minutes, 37. So we'll wrap this up. So anyway, I'm about 72,000 words into that. I hope to have it out in early next year. We'll see. It depends on timing too, because selling books is actually not great during the Christmas season. Because people are shopping for other people, and people rarely buy books for other people unless it's a really, really well-known author or they know that other person really likes that author. So book sales really start picking up in January. In fact, it's always the best month because the season's over. People have time to read. They have resolutions that they're going to read more. They have gift cards. So you really want to hit them. So I'm thinking about if I, having the book available for, right around New Year's. But I also thought, well, what if I use that momentum to build up my pre-order? Also, I'm not quite sure when I'll be done. So maybe I do pre-orders through January and February, and then the book comes out in March. I don't know. After that, I'm planning on writing a book called The Underground Railroad Ball, and it is going to be a prequel to Rampage on the River. Yes, Mexico My Love is also a prequel, but Mexico My Love is the story of Carl's parents, how they fall in love with each other, run away from France, from Marseille, France, and end up in the Mexican War. And in that book, Carl is born, and it kind of gets Carl to by the end of the book, you now know why Carl and his mom live in Detroit at the beginning of Rampage on the River. Rampage on the River starts at the beginning of the American Civil War, and it starts in Detroit, in which Carl is saying goodbye to his friend who's going down to Tennessee to fight for the Confederacy. But they're going to meet again later on in the series, throughout the series. And there was a ball that night that this is historical, that the kids, well, I'm taking it from U of M, which was not in Detroit at the time. I've heard reports that there was a ball to say goodbye to the Southern kids that were dropping out of school to go home, fight for the home states, and they were going to come back, and so they're northern friends. They're still everybody's friends. Threw them a ball to say goodbye, and then walked them to the train station the next morning, and hugged and kissed each other and said, hey, I'll come back soon. We're always going to be friends. So I start my book that way. So, and then Carl gets in trouble after saying goodbye to his friend. He gets in trouble with the law, which is how he ends up getting into the war himself. So Carl and Kyle end up on opposite sides. One's in the Federal Army, the other one's in the Confederate Army. They're best friends, and throughout the war, their paths, they're going to have separate adventures, and their paths are going to intertwine with each other. It's a great series, that trilogy. I hope you really give it a chance. So in it is a character named Chester E. Newman, who is a name I literally took off the roster of the 2nd Michigan Cavalry. Now, my Chester is not the historical Chester. There is a historical Chester E. Newman. I just took his name and created my own character. And there's one line in a memoir saying that he had a magnificent hat. So I thought, okay, well, this is great, because this is a guy with a lot of panache. And so I created this very bit larger than life character. So anyway, I'm writing a novella that Chester is a sheriff's deputy in the beginning of Rampage on the River. I'm giving him an adventure that happens just before Rampage on the River that has to do with the Underground Railroad, because so if you didn't know this, Detroit was a terminus of the Underground Railroad, meaning slaves running north would come to Detroit and then cross the Detroit River to Canada, because Windsor is on the other side, and that's Canada. And once it got to Canada, they were free, because Canada is part of Britain. Britain banned slavery since like 1838 or something like that. So I'm going to tell this story that sets up that's about a few days before the beginning of Rampage on the River. That's going to put Chester right where we find him in the book Rampage on the River. And it's going to be a novella, and it's going to be exclusive to my mailing list. So it's going to be an ebook that the only people you're going to get for free, and the only people who are going to get it are people on my mailing list. And so if you want to be a part of that, sign up below. I won't spam you. I will let you know when like my ebooks are 99 cents. If I'm going to make an appearance somewhere in public where you can come out and see me and buy a signed book, or if I'm going to play the fiddle somewhere. If you didn't know, I'm a fiddle player. I bet you didn't know this, but I'm a fiddle player too. I met Charlie Daniels a few times, and I so wanted to say that to him. I'd say, I bet you didn't know this, because that's from Devil Went Down the Georgia. But right after I finished writing this book, I'm going to write that novella. It's going to be a free gift to all my subscribers of my own email list. And the reason why I started, the same problem I told you about with Amazon, with their no control. I have 167 followers on Amazon that I have no way of contacting. I just have to hope that Amazon will do it for me. But my own email list, I can contact them anytime I want. I only have about 60 people on there. So I want it to grow and grow and grow. So please join me like that. I'm going to let you know when something new is coming out, the pre-order, any kind of news, any kind of appearances, or something's on special. That's it. I'm not going to do like, oh, it's fall and I can't wait to have pumpkin spice muffins and put on my Uggs and my yoga pants and go walk my Yorkshire Terrier in the park wearing my fleece vest and my fight, none of that kind of stuff. It's just going to be, hey, Rampage on the River is on special. Like right now, Blood for Blood is on special. And if you're in the UK and you sign up for my list, you're going to get an email on Wednesday saying Blood for Blood is 99 pence in the UK. So don't buy Blood for Blood now, because it's at full price. It'll be 99 pence on Wednesday. So there you go. This is why you listen, right? So once I finish that, then I'm going to write Black James, and Black James is so exciting for me. If you read my books, Black James is in Mexico, My Love. He's a pirate, and he's also mentioned in the trilogy because he's the father of two of my characters. And Black James is going to be a big departure. I almost wonder if I should make it part of the series or if I should just have it a standalone book or a new series. It's connected to the series, so it's connected to it. But Black James is going to be here are the things that are going to make it different from everything I've written so far. One, it's a new lead character in this book, and it's the first book that Carl doesn't appear at all. Carl's in Mexico, My Love, but he's just an infant, and he doesn't say a line until the very end of the book, where he's like 2 years old. It's a different subgenre. It's not a military. I write the subgenre that I'm in is called historical military fiction. This is not a historical military. This is a historical fiction, but it's a nautical adventure and it's a pirate book. So that's a very different genre. And I'm going to be reading other, just like I read Brightwell's book, because I'm writing something similar. I'm going to be reading a lot to get the tropes, to understand, because I want to give readers what they're expecting when you pick up a pirate book. It's going to be different, though, because this pirate is after the golden age of piracy, which is from like 16 something to the mid 1700s. This book is going to take place at the end of the 1700s, and because it's going to be generational. It's going to go all the way back. It's going to start in Africa. It's going to James's father or grandfather, I haven't decided yet, is going to participate in the War of 1812, but on the British side, and end up in Jamaica, and have his son, who is James. He's going to grow up on the docks, and it's going to be James' story of growing up in love with pirates, of reading pirate novels as a boy, pretending to be a pirate, and then something happens in his life, and he goes on this grand adventure and becomes the pirate that we meet in Mexico, My Love. And I think that scene in Mexico, My Love is going to be in this book, and we're probably going to get right around to that point. I think that's the plan. But yeah, it's going to be a pirate novel. It's not going to be it's not going to be about a war. It's a different character. It's a character that I've worked with, but a new main character. And I haven't written from his perspective. He's been in my books, but he is not from his perspective. The other thing is that this one is all my other books, because they're books that take place in wars. I've had to be very, very close to, like, when I have battles, I always make sure that my battles, even my detractors, even the bad reviews say the battles are good. So even the people who give me bad reviews say the battles are good. There will be some historical things in there, including the burning of Washington, D.C. But most of this book is going to take place outside of historical events. There will be historical events in it, but most of the book won't be tied to that. Most of My Love was that way. The first part takes place in Marseille, and yeah, I was very careful to make sure that I got everything historically correct. But Marseille was just the background for the story that was completely outside of a historical event. Other than, like, they go to an opera, and I had them see an opera that was popular at a time, and I describe a building, the opera house that was once there, that was gone, but I describe it so when you read that scene, I'm describing a real opera house that was in Marseille, a real opera that was sung in Marseille. One of the characters, there's some gun smuggling, and that's based off historical fact about gun smuggling, especially a lot of the Mexicans during the Mexican-American War were using British brown besses that were sold to them as surplus, because the British had stopped using the brown besses and were replacing them with rifles. I don't know if at that point they were using Baker's rifles or something else, because I kind of stay away from the British stuff. I have British characters, but there's plenty of Brits writing British history, so I'll leave that to them. I'll write everything else. So anyway, that will be a departure, writing this Black James. Once I get done with that book, and the timetable is my next book, the French Fast, will come out early next year. I'll spend about 6 months writing my novella, and then I'll spend up to 2 years to get Black James out, and then I'm going to get back on the track with Carl, and I'll have 4 more novels with him. I'll have or at least the series, right? I'll have a North African adventure. I'll have a Western. I'll have an adventure that takes place in Japan, and then I'll have one that will get us into World War I, basically. And that's the plan. And that will be book 11. And then from there, I got a lot of ideas I'd like to do. I have a kind of either World War II or a pre-World War II book that will be outside. It might be connected to the series, but everybody won't be dead, and so it might be the ancestors. I haven't thought that through. And then I'm going to back up. And I have a American Revolution idea that I'm really fond of. I have a Haitian Revolution idea, and I have a French Revolution idea that I want to do. And then maybe I might go back to like the early modern era, which is like the 1400s or 50, about the 1400s. But we'll talk about that later. Okay, I have gone I'm almost 2 hours. Wow. I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Listen, I'm all about the literary world. I'm for writers. I'm for readers. If you have an author out there like Robert Brightwell, if there's an author out there that you like and love, of course, buy their books, but give them stars, as many as you feel comfortable giving. 5 stars if you can. And that goes a long way, because, like, for example, Amazon, if you dip under 4 stars, they stop showing it to as many people. So we always want to stay above 5 stars or 4 stars. And if you can, write a review. It doesn't have to be as long as mine. It can be, hey, I really liked it, couldn't put it down. Done. Send it, bam, golden. It helps us a lot, because the more reviews and the more people that rate your books, I think once you get past 100, Amazon, that's kind of a milestone. Excuse me. I don't know if that's a legend or if that's true. Rampage on the River, which is my oldest novel, is sitting at like 97 ratings. Ratings are just where people give stars. So the ratings is the stars, review is when you write it out. So if you can, give people 5 stars and a positive review. And I'll tell you this. Yes, I admit it. If I review and rate someone, they get 5 stars and a good review. And I'm not being dishonest. I am balancing, I think, some unfair reviews sometimes. Sometimes people will give you a 1-star review for like, for a reason that's really unfair. I've had people give me the lowest rating review I've ever gotten was a 3-star review. I've gotten a few 3-star reviews. No, I think I got a 2. I got a 2-star review. I have gotten a few 2 or 1-star ratings, but most of mine are like 5s and 4s, thankfully, and that's why all my books are above 4 stars overall. But people will, ding you for like stupid things or things that are not true. Like, I've had people say, "Oh, well, the character said this, and they wouldn't have said that back then." No. Guess what? I did the research, and yes, they've been saying that since Shakespeare. In fact, a lot of the sayings that we say come from Shakespeare. So it drives me crazy when someone calls me out for that, because you can't answer to that. And so they give you a bad review because you're using language that they think is modern. People were using that language back then too. Sorry. And just things like that. I have a series that's in the American Civil War. And unfortunately, we can write about Napoleon and all this kind of stuff. And nobody gets upset about it, but a lot of people are still re-adjudicating the American Civil War, and it's still a modern day political flashpoint. And there are still people that, when you talk about like the Romans versus the Carthaginians, no one says, well, screw you, I'm with the Carthaginians, screw you, you fascist. No, it's just a war, and it's interesting. But the American Civil War, there are people who are still very emotionally attached to one side or the other. And I've seen bad actors on both sides bash away at each other. And so if they detect that you're on one side or the other, they're going to tear you apart. And in fact, I've been running a special on Blood for Blood, and Nathan Bedford Forrest is on the cover. And I'm not going to go into it, but he's very controversial. He's a villain to a lot. He's a hero to a lot of others. And so I got some comments on, and there's also a battle, a very famous, notorious battle that is thought of and depicted in different ways. I feel like I was very objective and truthful when I wrote about Forrest, and I wrote about this battle. It's the Battle of Fort Pillow. And I will tell you this. I've had people on both sides of that, people who are very passionate one way or the other, compliment me on that book because I was just honest. I didn't make it worse than it was. I didn't make it better. I just told the truth. And I also told the truth that regardless of what the war was about, right? And there are people that want to argue that today. I have what I believe, which I think is true, but it doesn't matter. I don't care. People did bad things on both sides. And so one side doesn't necessarily, because regardless of the cause, doesn't mean that just because, and I think that it's, what do they call this? It's utilitarianism. It's the same thing the bad guys during World War II did. And people do it today. And they do it on both sides of the aisle in the politics of America right now. When people think that your side is good, that your side is in the right, then everything you do in the name of that is okay, even if it normally would be a bad thing. And so that happened a lot. And so regardless of which side you thought was in the moral right, both sides did terrible things through the war, and both sides committed war crimes, and bad things happened, and innocent people on both sides suffered. So all that to say is I get 1 star or reviews because people perceive something that I'm not saying, or I'm going too far with this. I love you guys. Have a great weekend. I'll try to be back next week. I have some ideas. I might do a blurb release. Blurb is that information on the back of the book that says what it's about. I think I have it prepared. I just I wasn't sure if I was going to have the Battle of Sedan in my book. It is in my book. So I wanted to make sure that was the case before I put this blurb out because it mentions it. So maybe I'll do that. I'm not quite certain. I have some other ideas too, but I'm going to try to do this at least once a week. Okay. So get out there. If you're a writer, a little bit every day goes a long way. So keep writing. If you're a reader, keep reading. And if you're a writer, you should be reading as well. And, get out there, living authors who are out there busting their butts, trying to make it, even if you think they have made it, because I'm telling you, even the guys at the top are still struggling. Write some 5-star reviews, help them out. All right. I love you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great weekend.